Hello, everyone, and welcome to This is a Revolution, your weekly RevPro podcast, presented here by George with my good friend, Mr. Dave the Mark. Dave, how are we, sir?
All right, mate. All right.
Good.
How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, man. I'm a little bit tired today. Out gigging last night in Bristol, and yeah, I got home at quarter past midnight and had to get up at 6 a.m. alarm today to go into the office. Had to be in the office today as well,
I
unfortunately.
don't know how you still do that.
I don't know how I still do it, mate, but
Who
it
did you go and
happened.
see?
I went to see an act called Poppy, who I
Oh, I
imagine.
know her.
Oh, do you? That's
As
okay.
in, she had a big. She did a performance on NXT, didn't
She
she?
did, yes.
Yes, that's how I know
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, very unique act. It's in the metal genre, but yeah, she's a genre of one. Absolutely, like just yeah, so unique. One of my colleagues said, "Can I listen and see what it sounds like?" And gave him my earbud. She went, "Well, this is not my sort of music at all." I was like,
her.
it wasn't many people, but the venue was packed. It was funny. I had someone tell me that people are like very much will queue early for a good spot there, and for a small gig, it was the biggest queue that I've seen, like 45 minutes out. It was
Oh, really?
it was
I thought she was a
huge.
bigger deal than that. I thought she'd be at like the O2 or somewhere like that.
No, she's a decent sized deal, but not quite O2 level yet. In rock and metal especially, and when I say rock, I mean the more metal leaning rock.
Yeah,
It's been harder for bands to break through that level to get to
got
the
you.
O2. So we're now starting to see bands like Disturbed and people like that
Yep.
get through to that level. But yeah, up until that, no, it's been a very hard pay your dues kind of thing. So yeah.
You had a very busy Monday night after a very busy weekend as well, right?
Yes, it was very, yes, it was. I didn't quite realize at the time when I booked it all how closely I booked it all. So yes, I was in Walthamstow on Friday night at the Big Penny watching Miyu Yamashita beat the shit out of Jamie Hayter. That was, oh, I'm not sure there's many matches that can beat that for match of the year this year. It was glorious. It was
It
a yeah.
sounds delightful.
It was a match that ended twice in a draw that I would still have. So what happened is it ended a time limit draw. Everyone was
Right.
chanting for more, 5 more minutes. So Osprey came down and did his five, ring the bell, and it went to a draw again. And then at Queendom, they were part of a gauntlet match, and you could be eliminated by going over the top rope, and they both took each other out as well. So they're clearly building up to another
Oh,
encounter between the two. But even with all that, someone who hates draws wants a decisive winner. It was amazing. It was fantastic. I'd tell anyone to go out of their way to watch that. And yeah, Wrestle Queendom, £40 ticket. I think I paid for it. Maybe it was a bit more, maybe it was a bit less. I can't remember. I get all my things confused now. And
that
I had
sounds like a bargain considering how stacked that card was.
Yeah, I was told I was in the upper bowl, which having been in to go to before, there's a balcony bit at the top, so I thought I was up there. And it turns out I wasn't. I was where the floor seats are. There was a few rows of those, and then there's like a tiny little step that goes up, and then
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
sat
I've
there.
been to the Indigo.
Yeah, and I was sat, so that was counted as upper bowl seating because it was on a step. Um, and
I
I
know
was in the
exactly where you're talking
yeah,
about.
I was in the front row of that, so I was
Yeah, that's a
straight
great
on.
spot.
Yeah, it was wicked, mate. Honestly, the price that I paid for it, I was well happy with it. I know someone upgraded to a front row ticket because they came available, and they were originally sat the row behind me. And don't get me wrong, their seat was banging, but at the same time, wouldn't have been as much of a difference like view wise, you'd still got a pretty decent
Mm.
view. But if you were up the top, it would have been so much of a better upgrade on that. So yeah,
Yeah,
a very, very good show. Very well produced in the sense of 4 hours flew by, but
nice.
it didn't feel like 4 hours at all. But maybe started to wane once during the card a little bit, but hey, it
Which
was
we always talk about, right?
yeah,
That's like such a personal thing.
yeah.
We always say that at some point in a long show, we'll have a moment of not enjoying something as much,
Mhm.
but we're also quite mindful of the fact that that could just be our personal experience and our own kind of like fatigue setting in and attention span and things like that, where it's not actually reflective of whoever's in the ring.
100%.
It's just
Yeah.
it's a lot. You wouldn't watch a 4 hour film,
No.
and you wouldn't go to a football match for 4 hours or anything like that. So it is quite a unique thing in that sense, the wrestling.
Yeah.
What was the main event?
It was Stefan Martina versus Rio for the Eve title, and
But that is a bold main event as well, isn't it? Because they had a lot of international talent on there,
yeah,
but their main event was, you know, two people that are Eve regulars.
yeah,
I suppose a little bit like Oku and Jacob's main event in the Copper Box
yeah, and
at
not
the
only
end of a international card.
not only that, but Session Moth was like Resgal Eve, so like the really small venue Eve, comparatively to where we are now. And look, I can't say I've ever made it there myself. I almost did a couple of times, and I remember just watching videos at the time and being like, "This is really weird that the ring is up against two walls." Like, so I never actually
Right, yeah,
fully
yeah.
appreciated how small it was. And I watched videos and you see them like coming, there's like an area upstairs and they come downstairs to get into the ring. And yeah,
Yeah.
so like to go from there to where they are now, and Session Moth was part of that. For what I prioritize in my enjoyment of wrestling, Session Moth is one of those people I can appreciate, but doesn't necessarily, she's not someone that I would kind of look for in a main event match in those big high moments. So I was dubious for this, and they knocked it out of the park. Like I should not have doubted, and it challenges me to kind of go, actually, what are my tastes that I enjoy in wrestling, and what can someone do with a good
Yeah.
story?
I had similar on Sunday with the Freshners,
Mm,
um, who are very comedic and not necessarily what I look for in my
yeah,
wrestling. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it
yeah.
was really entertaining and something light and different, and it was actually quite a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I think it's good to challenge ourselves on what we watch, what we enjoy, and I thought, you know what, if it's in the main event, they're obviously going to produce this in a way that they think will work well. It was, mate, it was a love letter to like the past of Eve as well, and
Yeah,
the one thing that I found a little bit of a shame when I was scrolling Twitter afterwards is there's people who maybe aren't as familiar and were thinking they were just ripping off the WrestleMania ending from a couple of years ago, and it's like, but it was all of the like a lot of the Eve originals, Jamie Hayter, Alex Windsor, Jetta, Charlie Morgan. The one that really I popped for was Erin Angel, who was one of I think probably the first female wrestler that I saw on the independents. So I don't think I ever recall seeing one on any of the 1PW shows that I would have gone to, because at the time women's wrestling was still just not heavily featured. So I think it
yeah.
was at Salisbury City Hall on a card that ended up featuring Wade Barrett and Sheamus, or before they went to WWE. She was against a woman called Klondike Kate, and I remember Klondike Kate she was a big lady. And Erin Angel was a very small lady, and I just remember some of the bumps she was taking. I was like, "This is wild." And I'd never seen her again after that live.
Yeah.
So like that one moment, I'm like, "That's quite cool." Like to see that. Um, but yeah, it was just fantastic. Yeah, all round, some great matches. Amira versus Harley Cameron again. I think this,
16 stars, I heard.
mate, it should be 17. Yeah, it was.
Broke cage match, I heard.
Yeah, it was great. It was again. Harley Cameron is not someone that generally in AEW floats my boat. Um, because I look for a very different type of wrestler there. But doing what they did here, there was no two better people to do it. It was
Hmm.
like at one point Amira was singing show tunes. Like,
Yes, I
and when I say yeah,
heard.
I mean some people will tell you that she lip synced, but no, definitely not. It was yeah, there was puppets involved and everything. It was a sight. That's all I'll say. But
Like
yeah, it was a
a
great
proper
weekend.
celebration of Pro Wrestling Eve, Women's Wrestling, International Women's Day,
Yeah,
all kind
absolutely.
of wrapped into one, right?
It really was. I think look, I've been going to a few shows over the last year. I've watched some in the past, aware of things that have been going on. I've had some friends who are very big on the company, and it just, yeah, it felt like a really nice kind of wrap up of everything, the past, the present, and the future of what the
Hmm.
company is going to be. And what was nice, one of the things they always do at shows is whoever the MC is at the time will always ask, is this your first Eve show? Have you been? And they ask if it's your first live wrestling show. And the
Oh,
amount of
really?
people, yeah, the amount of people when you go to these shows that always cheer that it's their first ever live wrestling show is
I like that.
incredible. And I
I
don't,
remember being so
yeah,
nervous about my first ever wrestling show.
yeah, they're here, they shout, and they will pick someone, and that will be their go-to person for the night to like ask
When
questions and stuff.
I can't remember if I told this story on here before, so apologies if I have. But do you remember when Southside ran their last ever show and it made kind of mainstream wrestling news? I remember hearing it on the What Culture news video, um, because WWE pulled all their talent from it. So it was kind of like it was kind of PR'd as like Cody Rhodes saved the day because they sent Sean Spears and MJF and maybe
Oh
someone
yeah,
else down to Stevenage to do the show. And I remember looking at that thinking, that's only like 40 minutes from my house. I could go and see MJF and Sean Spears. I liked AEW. I watched it every week on TV. In fact, no, I think it was before AEW was on TV, and I was watching all the Road to Double or Nothings, and they were
yeah,
just in the free pay per views they did before they aired on telly. I just bottled it, mate. I completely bottled it because I was like social anxiety, going
yeah.
on my own, don't know anybody. What if it's? I just I don't have anybody to go with, and I'm too scared to go on my own. That is literally what it came down to.
Mhm.
Um, and then, yeah, I remember like going to my first ever show was suddenly then like, wow, this is a cool space. And it's
Yeah,
really interesting actually because that's something I've been thinking about the last couple of days. How wrestling is a space for people from all walks of life,
absolutely, mate. I look, I
and it's
yeah. Sorry,
it's
carry
quite
on.
hard to always understand that from the perspective of someone who's never really felt like they need a safe space. But it does make me think about that fact that the first time I was going to go to a wrestling show, I genuinely bottled it.
Yeah, and I get that because it can be a daunting thing. And I was having this conversation with my brother on the way home, and kind of like wrestling is such a weird little thing in that depending on who you ask, depends on what it is, right? And what I mean by that is you'll get people who see it for what it is. You always get people who think it's like some really manly like
Mm.
thing, like alpha male thing, and that's when you kind of see that, or you even a little bit of incel culture I've seen over the years as well.
Yep.
Um, and
I'll go back to the couple that came to Portchester Hall when Kanji was wrestling Emerson Jane,
mhm,
um, and they left
yeah,
because the woman said to the man, I overheard them because they were near me. She said, I don't like this at all. Can we leave? And I don't think that they liked how much the well, I don't think she liked how much the male crowd around her were enjoying watching two women hurt each other. I don't think from just generally kind of eavesdropping, I don't think she had a great grasp on what wrestling was, what was real, what wasn't real.
mm,
And she obviously had no idea who Kanji and Emerson Jane were to
yeah,
understand that Kanji wrestles a certain way and they've got a storyline and they've got beef between them.
mhm,
But it was interesting because it was, and I still get it all the time with kids at school when it's like, but is it really real? Or is it really fake? Or what about this and what about that? And it's still something that's so exposed, isn't it, wrestling? But there's still so much mystery to it
it is, mate.
to
Yeah,
those who are quite unaware of it.
yes, yeah, absolutely. And that does kind of go into like a lot about what live wrestling is like, what it's about, in the sense of if you don't know and you haven't had that initiation into it, like What is it? What are the people going to be? Because that is something that people do worry about, don't they? They worry about what is this going to be like? Is it going to be
Mm.
some kind of baying mob? And actually, wrestling to a degree has a really big overlap with another kind of interest slash subculture that I've followed over the year, and that is rock and metal gigs. In the
Yes.
sense of it's there is a like a fraternity aspect, community aspect to this. You're all there together. You're watching something that you probably got the piss taken out of you for watching. You've probably
Yeah.
had those, oh, like with wrestling and with metal. When are you gonna grow out of this music? When are you gonna
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the thing that I would hear a lot. Like people would treat you differently because of the music you listen to. So over the years, I would be laughed at for listening to screamo music. I'd also be laughed at for shouldn't you be going out wrestling by now? And there is some of that that people, I imagine, won't know what it's like to go there. And that means that you need to, and you mentioned a word earlier, and we'll get into this fully because obviously we're gearing up to talk about a subject that's very important, and kind of we'll get onto how we're going to run this podcast in a moment. But the representation that allows people to feel a safe space to come to these shows. And I think that's a really important thing to discuss. Now, obviously, you alluded earlier, Dave, International Women's Day. And
Mm.
one of the things that really dominated conversation over the course of the weekend was Rev Pro didn't have a women's match featured. So we we talk about this from the perspective I understand completely of two middle-aged white men. Okay, so we've when I say never experienced like anything in the way that marginalization, like no matter how
No.
tough we've ever had anything, and I use that very loosely, um, as a boy that grew up on a council estate and felt like a little bit of like, oh, I didn't get this, like still had so much of a head start in life than a lot of people will have done and a lot of people have experienced and never once been marginalized based on things out of my control. Right. So we know that we're talking about that from a pretty privileged position to be in. But we felt that it was important because we understand that when we started this podcast, that we created something that was it was really going to be a watch along more than anything, wasn't it? And just documenting. But in actual fact, this is
Guys
something.
that love the same wrestling company, right? Talking about why we like that company and
Yeah,
trying to get more people to be aware of it
yeah, and
was kind of our goal, wasn't it?
that was
Just
it.
promote what we love.
That was it. We started with that, and then as we've grown, we don't look. I'm not saying this in a way that we're like a huge platform like Fightful, right? As of today, right now, looking at it, we have 187 subscribers. Okay, we don't have a huge following. We understand we're a niche within a niche, but we speak to a lot of people who are either watchers, listeners, or are aware of what we do. And we have people that will look to us for our thoughts and opinions on these matters. And
Hmm.
I think that's important as if we weren't just a solely a Rev Pro based podcast, it might be a little bit different, but we are a podcast that is designed around a particular company. So I think it's important, and we've both agreed on this, it's important that we don't shy away from this. We talk about this and what it means. And I know, and again, we'll get into this a bit further. I know that we had, as of Sunday, we had very different views initially of things, and we'll talk about everything, and there's nothing that we won't unturn here. The pieces that I kind of just wanted to go over, sort of housekeeping wise, before we start, because people will be like, this is a choice, not inviting someone else on, because there are a lot of women in space who could have added here. So I kind of wanted to lead in and talk about that because I have had people message me and talk about maybe some of the messaging that we put out, and kind of wanted to get how we got here. So initially, this episode was going to be an interview episode that I'm still hoping we can get booked in for a later time, and just couldn't get the scheduling right. So that then led to us trying to work out, oh, when are we going to do this episode, and completely forgetting, as I mentioned earlier, I had a gig on Monday, so we are like, we better get this booked in for
Wife's
Tuesday.
birthday
Yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah, wife's birthday tomorrow as well, so kind of tonight was the night to do this. And we were discussing, and we did question whether it was our place to talk about this. Were we the right people to talk about this? Would we be being derelict in our duties with this podcast and the platform that we have if we didn't talk about this? Would we be showing the right level of allyship if we didn't talk about this? There was a lot of conversations that Dave and I had on this yesterday.
It didn't feel right, did it, mate? This was kind of how I posed it to you, I believe, when I texted you on yesterday. For us to just come on today and just talk about what did we like about Rev Pro Show on Sunday, what didn't we like about Rev Pro Show on Sunday, felt like it was avoiding the elephant in the room.
100%.
That there's something much bigger to talk about.
Yeah.
And you're right. I never planned to be on a podcast that dealt with political issues and social issues and big talking points. I just wanted to talk about, I really liked that 450 splash, and I like it when Josh James does his big splash off the top rope as a tsunami rather than when he stalls before he does it. And I think Sean Samuels is really good at talking on the microphone, like just kind of fanboying for a company. But things change and things evolve, and whether we asked for it or not, we are in a position where our voices are listened to. And also, a lot of the conversation on Sunday came around from the preview that I'd shared on Twitter for Rev Pro, and the fact that I responded to the first person who replied to that, criticising the company, and I responded kind of defending the company's position.
Yeah.
And I think what's really important, and what you and I have spoken about, is there's a really interesting conversation to be had. And, we're both people, especially when I think about the fact that, I'm an educator, I teach, and have done for all of my adult life. I like discussing the bigger things, and I like being in part of that, but it has to be a conversation on the right platform, and Twitter isn't that platform, is it?
No,
when you're trying to squeeze everything into 140 characters, and
absolutely, yeah,
there are good faith people on there, and there's bad faith people on there, and you get lost in a sea of notifications, and this feels like the right platform to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, what I can say is the people that I've engaged in, I can't speak for you and what you've engaged with and what you've had. The people I've engaged with, it's been generally very good faith arguments.
Yeah, me too, mate. Me too.
So I just want to make that clear.
And I would have liked to have been able to continue the conversation on. Simply ran out of time before the show.
Yeah.
Once Sunday morning's gone, it's back to real life of teaching all day, and
absolutely.
And do you know what? It kind of gets to the point where you're like, do you know what? The conversation's moved on. Don't feel like I'm going to add to it, other than to have this conversation in the right space.
Absolutely, yeah. And look,
could we have had somebody join us tonight? And should we have had like female representation on the podcast? I think it's a fair question.
Yeah.
But similarly, this is I think then there should be lots of conversations around this topic, and not just our conversation. Ours is just one of many conversations. We are a very, very small and limited little podcast, and we want to have a conversation whereby there's not 3, 4, 5 voices, but we are definitely wanting to have a conversation that considers the viewpoint of as many people as possible.
100%. That's a good.
That's really what.
Yeah.
Really, what I've spent the last couple of days doing.
Yeah, and
it was like the first thing I did on Sunday was ask my wife for her take on it, and then from there talk to wrestling fans, talk to people that aren't wrestling fans, but are just women. Talk to my girls about it. That was really interesting. I didn't realise quite how mature my 11-year-old is. To be able to have that conversation, we had like a really good hour-long chat about it. I even took it into the classroom and talked about it with guys and girls in my classroom this week, because there's a lot more to it than I at first acknowledged, and I'm definitely guilty of that.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the things you touched on there was about the the representation that we have on here. And look, that was partly a decision made by me in terms of how we're going to run today. So one of the things that we don't want to do, because I understand it's a very serious matter, so does Dave, without wanting to speak for him there, and it's the first time I'm having to come on and do something like this. And one of the things that Dave and I know that we can be really guilty of, just by the way that we do podcasts, and if you've watched one of our podcasts, if you listen to us, you will understand this, is we bounce around lots of things very pinball-like. And we're trying tonight to not do that as much because we want to keep this tight. We want to keep focused. That's not to say that we couldn't do that with other people, but I'll be honest, if we had someone else on who maybe I don't know as well, haven't got that relationship, I'd be worried about how what I'm saying could impact them as well, and want to make sure that anyone that comes on this podcast is comfortable with us and the subject at hand. So there was that side of me that just kind of thought if we could keep it to the two of us, then we have that bit more control over making sure we have the right kind of conversation and not just pinball between points. So when I said online, I don't want this to get into a debate, that's not because I don't think a debate should be had. I just don't know if we're the right people to have debates about this because we don't have that lived experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that element that I didn't want it to get into, and I know certainly some people took that as us not wanting to have women on the podcast. Certainly not the intention behind it whatsoever. And look, if anyone thought that, then I apologise for kind of how that may have come across. And like we've said, Twitter is quite a difficult place to try and have these kind of conversations because it's so few characters. But I kind of want to, so I'm going to set up with kind of how I felt kind of coming into this. So card starts coming out, drip feed, drip feed, drip feed, and it came very apparent that no women's match was forthcoming. And I just want to make my position clear, like straight away, that I thought that was a really, really bad look for RevPro, who I consider to be the market leading wrestling company. Okay, so the biggest wrestling company in the UK. When I say market leading, that's what I mean, the kind of the area, not necessarily in women's wrestling, because obviously Eve have just gone out and done something absolutely incredible. But in terms of size, name value, recognition, RevPro have been the bigger wrestling company in this country. So I kind of come into that thinking it was a pretty bad look on International Women's Day to not have a match. And I thought it was even more of a bad look, and I thought that there was certainly some optics there, if you kind of want to go down that route, that could have been there was things that we could have had happen here. And we'll go into all of this. We'll delve into all of this. But I kind of think if you're not going to have a women's match on International Women's Day, I do think that needs to be addressed by the company before the show even takes place.
So that was effectively where I cast my opinion on Sunday. I acknowledged the fact that RevPro had 12 women on their show last week. They've got 4 women lined up for next week, at least. We don't know if there's going to be more as well. And the fact that all of the women who are currently involved in storylines for RevPro were booked on Eve / Kanji and WXW.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, my question was, does it then come down to there has to be a women's match? So we'll put on a token women's match for the optics, book 2 women, put them in an exhibition match. No real reason for it, no outcome for it, but just for kind of positive PR. That was what I kind of put out. And it kind of started off as just a conversation between me and one other guy because he was very much just like, yes, that's what they should have done. And I was like, but it shouldn't be for optics sake. It shouldn't be we're doing this because we don't want to look bad. I think what I failed to really kind of take on board is they're not the only two options. Because the other option is you plan for this.
I think, yeah,
Queendom didn't come out of nowhere.
no,
It was announced months ago.
100%.
And someone posed the question of, like, they've had all this time to prepare for this event. And I kind of looked at it as like, oh, that's a bit naive almost, because you're not taking into consideration all the other events Rev Pro run and how they're trying to get all these storylines lined up and they're trying to get everything building up to high stakes and Revolution Rumble and ultimately the anniversary. But when I really, really actually stopped and thought about it, and having conversations with lots of people helped me to realize it, that when Queendom was announced, that's where you would expect the forward planning to be. Queendom's happening on International Women's Day. They're going to do a big celebration in London for International Women. What are we going to do for International Women's Day?
Mm-hmm.
One. And I'm not going to be able to use any of my regular women. So what will I do?
Yeah.
And you get something lined up early doors. And I think that my kind of stance of what was Rev Pro meant to do was one of looking at it from a position of they couldn't forward plan.
Yeah, I
But of
understand.
course
Yeah,
they could.
yeah, I understand what your view there, and I thought that was obviously an interesting view you had. And look, be upfront. Well, full disclosure to anyone listening slash watching this, Dave knows how much I disagreed with. What we said about what Dave said on Sunday, and I said I disagree with a lot of what you said, and Dave was like, "What?" I said, "Actually, pretty
So
much
did my wife.
everything." Yeah, and that's why we're here chatting now as well, because I think it's important that we do discuss these things and have these conversations. And I found
Can I
boiling,
interject 1 second, mate,
of
just to
course,
put my cards on the table?
yeah, of course,
I disagree now with myself too.
yeah, and again, while we're here as well, because I think it's important that we can have these conversations, not just about what we felt, but what you've learned since as well, and what we've
That's it.
yeah,
It's like getting some flack off people that I don't know on the internet. I'm thicker skinned than that. So that's not at any point affected my thoughts. Some really well put together arguments made by some people that I do know on the internet got me thinking.
hmm
Having conversations with my wife got me thinking. I even had a conversation with my mother-in-law about it, who knows nothing about wrestling, but just as like a woman who she's in her 60s, so she's grown up through never being represented in anything as a
hmm
woman, in sort of like the 70s. Um, Talking to my kids about it, like I say, talking to friends in the wrestling community, but also talking to friends who aren't in the wrestling community. Genuinely, like just 2 hours ago tonight, there was five of us sitting in my living room behind me here having a chat about, no, none of them knew anything about wrestling, but I was like, this is what happened on Sunday. What do you think? And
yeah,
those sorts of conversations really got me to think, because it made me think about how there are so many other things that could have been done, but ultimately nothing was done.
no, and
Nothing at all.
no, and that's a really, it's to me that's quite damning in a lot of ways, because so let's talk about some of the arguments that we saw out there and kind of we can discuss. But one of the arguments, and I don't know if it was from you or if it was someone else, was, well, we've got stories going on, and I think it's really important. One of the things to acknowledge is RevPro were definitely in a state where the women's division was underserved, very much underserved, in the sense of there just wasn't many matches happening. And then we saw the Cutthroat Collective come in. We saw a real shift in focus. We saw more women coming in, and we
That was
saw
definitely, I feel, and I think I speak on your behalf as well, mate, that you feel as well. The formation of the Cutthroat Collective felt like a turning point.
yes, it definitely did feel like a turning point. But what that doesn't mean, and I think I'm probably speaking for you here a little bit, is that we don't go, right, well, that's a turning point and that's where we are now as the status quo. We have definitely seen the division start to incorporate more stories, or
Yep.
even if not fully fleshed out stories, women who have objectives that it looks like they're working towards, side quests and stuff like that. And
Yeah, rivalries, right?
yeah, exactly. Like bits that could develop into something, and that's pleasing to see. But there's still work to be done, and I'd say that across wrestling across the country. And it's funny you were saying about people you speak to. I speak to my brother about it today, and we were talking about the situation. My brother, who has absolutely no interest in wrestling, but one of the things that really grabbed me, and I've put my cards on the table, was that, well, could we really have just brought two women in to have a match, like who have no history in RevPro? RevPro just announced a number one contenders tournament, Revolution Road, right? And while there are stories within that, there are a lot of people. So yeah, the Revolution Road. So I'm looking at the graphic now, and we've we've got one. So I'm going to talk about names either that have never appeared in RevPro
Hmm.
or have appeared so long ago. One, two, three, four, five. So
Yep.
when you're talking about a tournament, and I've just seen the Donovan Dijak commented on it as well. Clearly wanted in the tournament. Sorry, I digress. So I suppose for me the argument that you that we didn't have stories doesn't hold water, because we're putting Ricky Sosa, who has got a great following and a great reputation. I'm not suggesting otherwise.
Mm.
Very earned, but we're putting him on the Wolverhampton show, a big show. We're putting Tate Mayfair's in his debut in the
Yep.
tournament. I'm not even going to try and butcher Guido's surname.
Guido.
Yep, but we've got Guido on there. Jack Morris, he's the one I'm not sure if he has featured in Red Pro. If not, certainly not heavily
Yeah,
in
but
the time I've watched.
came over, did 3 shows, went off again.
Yeah, and I know that he didn't um, perform at the weekend
He
in the
did
end.
not. He had
Yeah,
travel issues,
yeah.
and Tom Felwell wrestled in his place and did marvelously.
I think I've just. Sorry about that. I just pulled the cable out of my microphone. Um, can you hear me okay? So yeah, we've got these names that have never appeared in Rev Pro before. So that's where I think I understand the argument of, well, we've got stories going on here. Right, I understand that completely. And do you want to mess around with that? And I suppose the other part of my argument as well, and this is where, and I understand it, and this is not to be kind of, there is a part here where you can link into a story, but at the same time, we had a trios match featuring three of the contenders.
Mhm.
And I think again, I think it's difficult to get past it as well when you've got two of the contenders who I don't believe have ever appeared on a Red Pro main show before. So
So
again,
just
yeah,
of the 8 matches on Sunday, we had the Fresheners debut,
hmm
we had Guido debut,
hmm
we had Big Dog Mecca debut, we had Jack Morris return for the first time in a long time, and he's not staying. He's just going to do a couple of shows, isn't he? He was
hmm
surely going to lose to TK Cooper, and that be the end of it.
hmm Yeah.
or maybe go through and go out in the next round, replaced by Tom Felwell making his debut.
Mm-hmm.
Elvin Narayan and Chicago Desai making their debuts. And you know what? I might have even missed somebody making their debut because there were that many.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is there wasn't a match on Sunday that was not setting up something for the high stakes / Coventry weekend, and that every single match that was booked did have a storyline purpose. So when you look at it from Connor Mills and Liam Slater sets up, we're now getting Connor Mills versus Leon Slater at high stakes. That match needed to happen. Leighton Buzzard and Leon Cage needed to happen so that we could introduce the tag team of Josh Holly and James Ellis. The Bryants needed to wrestle the Contenders so the Bryants could win, so we don't have, why is Ricochet and the Gates of Agony wrestling these three guys who never win as a trio? So that gives them a win going into that. And we've just set up the new Contenders class, so hence their introduction. The Shah Samuels match with Guido, the Big Dog Mecca match with Kuro, the TK Cooper match were all part of this tournament, which is a storyline in itself, the tournament, and part of the tournament is it's going to introduce international talent that are not familiar to Rev Pro. And so therefore, when I looked at it, there was a part of me that was like, all of these matches need to happen. There's no fat on this show. If you understand why they're being booked, even from the Bryants are being booked to give them a bounce into Ricochet's match so that, their win-loss record looks a bit better. But ultimately, you can look backwards and say, was there a match last week that didn't need to happen where one of these matches could have happened so that a women's match could have taken place this weekend? And is there, the Young Guns versus the Fresheners is probably the one where you'd look at it and think, that didn't really need to happen because Young Guns, we know what they're doing at high stakes weekend. They're wrestling Cowboy Way in Coventry. This match doesn't necessarily affect that. But on the other hand, from a company point of view, the Fresheners would have been booked a long time ago because they're not Rev Pro talent. So the Fresheners and Big Dog Mecca and Kuro and all the people that have to travel in for a Rev Pro show would have been booked ages ago. It does then beg the question, if they've gone to the effort to book those people ages ago, why didn't they go to the effort to book a women's match ages ago?
Yeah.
Which I think is very, very fair.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea. I still don't like the idea of them picking two random women and putting them in a match. And all the conversation I've had with people, no one's got me to change my mind on the idea that the right thing to do was to get two young women. Let's go, two young women, like take your pick, never appeared in Rev Pro before, probably used to wrestling on the smaller British shows because all of the your names in Rev Pro in British wrestling would be booked this weekend. And it wasn't even just Queendom and thing, was it? There was there were other shows taking place. I don't think the right thing to do was a week or two before the show look at, okay, let's see who we can get. We'll get two young girls. We'll stick them in the opening match. They can have an exhibition match. And we don't really have anything lined up for the winner, but at least that way there'll be a women's match and we won't get flack for it. I still don't think that was the right thing. But it wasn't the only other option. And that's what it's taken me a little bit more reflection to realise. And actually, the number of different things that Rev Pro could have done has come from conversations. So Like my wife made the simplest point in the world. She said, even if Andy had just come down to the ring and said, you know, well, after Francesca's done the "Are you ready?" he come down, put over Francesca as the woman
Absolutely.
representing Rev Pro on International Women's Day,
And that's a key
acknowledged
thing,
the
yeah.
fact that there are no women on today's card, but that is because there is a huge celebration of British women taking place in London today. And we are so proud that so many of the wrestlers that you guys love seeing in a Rev Pro ring are representing women's wrestling today in London. Doesn't need to mention Pro Wrestling Eve if that's like a politics thing of them being rival companies. I don't even know how much they consider themselves to be rivals. Maybe
No,
it is just a, why not put them over? Why not acknowledge this?
and do you know what, right? We spoke earlier, and I know we keep saying we'll get onto this, but I want to make sure we don't rush things. But we mentioned representation, and I think that even if there is a politics thing that we're not aware of, I would still say that's one of those moments where I'd be like, no, mention them.
Politics
Like,
sometimes needs to be put aside, right?
politics needs to be put aside in favor of progress, the
I
action, not the company.
So sitting around chatting to people, one of my friends who doesn't know anything about wrestling said, would it not have just also looked better if they'd just done like a cool video package celebrating all the women that have come through Rev Pro? And I've kind of thought to myself, like, what would that look like? Yeah, absolutely. From Giselle Shaw to Mercedes Moné, Zoe Lucas, Jamie Hayter, Alex Windsor, like all these people,
Mhm.
Sarah Hatch and Francesca Oliver, and that would have been something.
Yeah, 100%.
I still don't think that's the right thing to do because I think there should have been a match.
Yeah,
But I feel like that could have been something additionally. You made a good point earlier when we were chatting just between us. You said that Rev Pro don't really tend to do things for like calendar events.
yes, yeah,
And so, in a sense, it's actually consistent to not do something specifically for International Women's Day.
yeah,
And I get that.
yeah,
But I still think when they're in a position where we can't book a women's match for that day, then that policy, if it's a policy, that viewpoint should have changed.
yeah.
And it should have been, well, we can't do a match, so we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
And I still stand by the fact that they could have done a match.
I'm gonna get into.
Because
Sorry, carry on.
well just I've thought about where I think if I don't think they should have put two young women in, I think what should have happened was when Queendom was announced and Queendom was booked, and Andy's looked forward and seen, okay, we're running a show in Sheffield on the same day, or even when he's booked his dates for this year. I don't know when that takes place. Maybe it was as late as December that he's looked at it as, okay, in March, we're going to be running Sheffield the same weekend that Queendom's taking place. It's International Women's Day. I'm not going to be able to use. And I do think it's worth noting Sky Smithson and is involved in a storyline, can't use her. Kanji's involved in a storyline, can't use her. Amira is involved in a storyline, can't use her. And all the people, there's a lot of storylines going on in Rev Pro with women at the moment, which is the best it's ever been. And that's, we're not slamming the company in any way. But at that point, it should have been, I can't use my normal people.
Mm-hmm.
So let's put on a special international women's match to showcase. And funnily enough, Sunday's card didn't have an obvious main event. I didn't know what was going to main event it. I normally ask Andy before I do the match graphic. I ask Andy what's main eventing just to make sure that I put the match graphic together with the right match at the top. I didn't this week because the match graphic kind of looked quite good, just the way I'd done it, not knowing. And Connor Mills and Liam Slater headlined. It was a really good headline match. But there's no reason why that match couldn't have had a main event above it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an opportunity here to do a main event with two international women. And yes, that would cost more money. And maybe Sheffield isn't the place to bring two imports in because it's not Portchester Hall that can fit hundreds of people in it. And maybe the weekend of Wrestle Queendom, where you're probably going to have a smaller crowd. There were some regulars that weren't in Sheffield on Sunday because I know they were at Queendom.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not the best weekend to go out of your way to spend extra money, but maybe it's worth it.
Yeah,
maybe it's worth it to take a little financial hit and be like, do you know what? International Women's Day, we're going to acknowledge it. We're going to acknowledge the representation of women in wrestling. We're going to put together a match between two. And when I say international women, we don't have to be flying people in from Japan in terms of the amount this could cost. We could be flying women in from other countries that are much closer, but putting together a real like exhibition main event, an international women's main event for International Women's Day. Or you go the other way, and a lot of people seem to have been appeased at the idea that they just showcase some young women.
Yeah. So
and that's the point, isn't it? Of this is what quite a few people have said to me. International Women's Day is about giving opportunities to women.
Absolutely. So I think one of the things that we mentioned there was about obviously calendar events, right? So that's we spoke about that, and I think where I don't want to say where it's different, maybe that's not the right phrase, the turn of phrase, but we're living in a very fractured world, right? More and more fractured by the day, and I can't remember a time when it's felt more fractured, okay, in terms of social dynamics and things outside in the world. And one of the things that we can say about Rev Pro is in terms of the men's division and who's been featured heavily, there's been representation that has occurred naturally throughout, in the sense of it has never been done for the need to have to put someone in that position to represent, in the sense like we talked. I know one of the things that you mentioned was Black History Month, and obviously Michael Oku, for instance, the face of the company, right? And there are a lot of wrestlers of color within Rev Pro, and especially on the men's side, have had the chance to shine and put the company on their back as well. And I think that's been really important because when this sort of thing happens, it needs to not be lip service. It needs to not be to
Yes.
appease. And you mentioned optics earlier, and there's a couple of different things for optics. And you're right, we can't just have it for the sake of optics, right? We can't just do a women's match for the sake of it's International Women's Day, therefore we just need to have a match to fill a quota. It has to mean something. And this isn't
And they had time to make something that would mean something, didn't they?
They did. And where I feel really strongly about this, and this isn't necessarily a thing that I would necessarily expect Rev Pro to think about, right? So I'm not slamming them for this, but it is a real conversation. Is you look at groups who are having their rights marginalized, and it's people in the LGBTQ communities, and it's people, well, it's women, right? And we've got developed countries that are removing women's rights to like to just medical procedures, right? Medical choices about their own bodies and stuff. So it's
This time
even
last year, we were all talking about adolescence, right?
yeah. So it's really important that more than ever that these things are highlighted. You spoke about optics and the optics of fandom almost, right? So we alluded to this right at the beginning, right? So you've got a couple of different options. You have the optics that, hey, we just need to get a women's match because it looks good for us. Okay. That is really cynical. I'm not saying that's what RevPro would do, but it's a really cynical move to do that. If I'm honest, I think unless you get the talent for it that would justify the main event, I also think that having an international women's match on International Women's Day be the main event, I think that could come across as maybe a bit tokenism or a bit patronizing potentially, because what we do say that you earn your spots. There will be people that would have earned their spots on the card given that opportunity. I don't think people are asking for women to come in and go, well, we have to put them in the main event, right? That would be a nice touch if the people that are
that's
deserving
probably where I was thinking about. If I don't know who was available,
of course, yeah,
but
but
let's say you could get you said earlier about Jamie Hayter wrestled
Comedian
Yamashita.
wrestler. Yeah, if you
So
get
let's
the
say you've
right,
got
yeah,
Yamashita and Azumi.
yeah, if you got
That's
the
a main event, isn't
if
it?
you got the right level of talent to justify that spot, 100%. But I think,
Alternatively,
yeah,
if you got Jane Nero and you got Celine from France,
mhm,
and you put them in a match, that's probably not going to main event,
no,
but it's
and
still an international women's match that could take place. Or
exactly.
you go down the route. My first thought was a Revolution tag between like 8 young women, or even like a battle royal
Mhm,
where the winner gets, you know, an eliminator match
yeah,
against the champion. You know, so yeah,
100%.
you don't get a shot at Alex Windsor, but you get to step in the ring with Alex Windsor, and even then they could purposely book young women to make it be like almost like we don't have. Because my wife said to me, she said, couldn't they have done something with female contenders? And I said, well, there aren't any female contenders because, and there's nothing, you know, RevPro can't invent younger women to attend the London School of Wrestling and attend the Portsmouth School of
Mhm,
Wrestling, but they could use young women and present it like a contender style match.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
there's just
absolutely.
I think the point is, and I don't even necessarily want to go away from today thinking this is what Rev Pro should have done. But there's lots they could have done, and ultimately they did nothing.
I think so. Touching on optics, right? And I agree. Like we're not going to be the ones to say they should have done this, they should have done that. I mean, I do think. Well, when actually no, the bit I will stand on business is I do think they should have had a women's match. Right, that is the bit that I
Yes.
will say that that should have happened. That to me is a non that or something before the show, and I mean a post or something to say, hey, look, we're not going to participate in this because we want to leave the talent for Eve. A couple of bits, and I might get sidetracked here, so apologies, bear with me. First of all, the other thing, to be fair here, that we don't know is that there may have been talent who may have been booked for this show who've said, "Hey, I've been asked to be part of this Eve show.
Yep.
Can
Very, very
I?"
fair.
That the team could have said, "Go, release their bookings." Right? That could have happened, and we aren't aware of it. So there's that element of it. There's the element of people who could have been approached to be on the show, but have said, "I just want to be in London with all
Yep.
my friends and celebrating them." That is also another really fair thing, right? So these are things that could be happening as well that kind of inform what happened here. But
And Andy said before, hasn't he, that it was a couple of years ago he said this. So I don't know if the situation's better or worse, but he said that one problem that he's always faced, a challenge he faces, is that the women in Britain tend to be booked up much further in advance than the men
mhm,
because of the, I suppose, more they're in greater demand. Um, and so there's that element to compete with as well.
yep, absolutely. But the other thing as well is that there will have still been women who would have been available, and that's the
Yes.
key thing. And optics was a thing that we spoke about earlier, representation, right? We've said that word a lot today. Um, People look for representation in an environment that they want to be part of. So
Mm.
if every wrestler on the card is booked to be a John Moxley, right? Let's use him as an example, and someone doesn't necessarily see someone who looks like them on the card, right? That's a really cliche thing to say, I know, and I appreciate that. But it might make them feel uneasy. But what's the crowd going to be like? Is it going to be a safe environment for me? And by not having cards with women on, you could start to have people go, well, there's no one like you could have girls at home who want to go to these shows and they don't see someone who looks like them. We've seen how
Yeah.
much of an impression Amira has had on people, right? And that's from a
Look at
managerial
my
aspect.
girls, mate.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I've got two girls that I take to the wrestling. They want to see girls being badasses.
Hmm. Yeah,
My kids are growing up in a world that is different to the world I grew up in. I'm 39. got an 11-year-old girl and a 9-year-old girl, and what it is to be a little girl these days, what a girl can become, what a girl can be perceived as, is very different to what it was like growing up in the 1990s. And I'm so happy for that. Love the fact that my girls don't believe that they're limited in what they can do, and that they can see people like Kanji kicking people's ass, and that they, my little girl loves Nina Samuels' teeny tiny hat, and she loves her outfits and her, like, honestly, if Sophie could dress in Nina Samuels' ring gear, she would be delighted. Like, that is her ideal thing. I took Phoebe and Sophie to Elevation Wrestling. They didn't know anybody wrestling. It was all brand new to them. Who were they talking about in the car on the journey home? Maddie Morgan, the girl on the show. And she was the only girl on the show because the girl that she was going to wrestle got hurt. Very, like, literally didn't even get to wrestle. So it had to become an intergender match. But that is more than I think I realise. I've always talked up representation. I've always thought that representation is really important. I teach a lot of children from different ethnic backgrounds. It's really, really important that they have role models within those different cultures. That they can look on TV and see fellow Black men and women, fellow Asian men and women, fellow, Eastern European, Roma Gypsy traveller, like, all different walks of life. It's important that when we turn on our TV, we don't just see me looking back at you, middle class, middle aged white man.
100%.
That's what it's always been, and I failed to kind of acknowledge that, really. The most important, the conversation that's sticking with me the most that I've had was with my friend Emma, who is a RevPro regular. Goes to WrestleForce a lot as well. Goes to Eve a lot, and she's someone I feel comfortable with. And this is something that's, we go back to why we don't have a woman on the podcast tonight. I'd love Emma to be on the podcast with us. Like, she'd be the perfect person for it. Because of the fact that I can ask her questions like I asked her through text, that I couldn't ask another woman who maybe I've met a couple of times at a show and said hello to. I mean, let's face it, online, it's very rare for us to even know each other's names. Even me, like, as someone who, my photo is my profile picture and I'm Dave, but I'm still Dave the Mark, not Dave Marsham. Like, we're still quite anonymous.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's, I'm a teacher and I don't want kids to find my social media. Well, that didn't really work with the Phoebe predictions, did it? But there's that side to it. And then there's a lot of people where, like, we don't know them well enough to be able to ask those questions. And I said to Emma, how much does it bother you that there was no women's match on the RevPro card on Sunday? And she said, I think it's pretty poor. And I said, can I ask some questions about it? I just want to understand it a bit better. I said, is it because it was International Women's Day? She was like, no, International Women's Day is not important. The fact that it was International Women's Day, she said, is not, they didn't need to acknowledge that. That's not the thing. It's the fact that it's a RevPro card. RevPro's big British company. And there should be women on every RevPro show. No excuses. Every show, there should always be women on there. And again, I felt comfortable to be able to ask. So why is that? I said, I said, I'll throw you some options. So I asked her, is it because RevPro have a women's division, a tag division, a cruiserweight division, a heavyweight division? All divisions should be represented on every show. I said, is it because the representation of women is an important enough issue that there should always be women on the show to represent RevPro's like core values as a company that is trying to like close the gap between men and women in the industry. I said, is it because RevPro has kind of like a responsibility to help future proof professional wrestling? And he talks about it all the time, doesn't he? You know, we're future proofing British wrestling. The future of British wrestling is good because we're bringing through talents. But is there a responsibility to be making sure that they bring through women? And if the argument is, well, you know, the quality of women that were available on Sunday maybe aren't quite ready for a Rev Pro match, maybe give them a match anyway,
I would agree.
and support them through it and coach them through it and agent them through their match to make sure that it works and do that anyway. And she came back saying that she doesn't think that every show needs to have every division, but that, you know, women aren't just a division in Rev Pro, that they are, it's more than that. And therefore, it is about the second two options, the responsibility to future proof and the bringing, closing the gap, the gender gap in the industry. And I just don't think I've ever really kind of been, I've never really looked at it like that.
Mm.
And then my wife would be the first one to say, of course you haven't, because you're a bloke. The same way that you've never really understood what it's like to be like a young black kid when the police stop them and ask them what they're doing on the streets, because you never got stopped as a young white kid, but the black kids get stopped. You know, and these are things which are not my lived experience. And it's a weird one, mate. I wish I'd never tweeted anything on Sunday.
I think
I
though,
wish I'd never got involved in any of it because none of it's been particularly a pleasant experience.
can I say something
I've learned a
controversial?
lot.
I was going to say, Dave, I think it's about what the intent is coming out of this, right? So I've said this that I right at the start that I disagreed with a lot of what you said. Okay, but I also when I take someone's words, it's important for me to consider context and the person behind it as well, right? And even then, one of the things that Twitter doesn't allow and online discourse doesn't allow, and I say this a lot with wrestling in general, is nuance, right?
Mm.
People are, it's this or it's this, and in fact, it's more in the middle here, right? And I think I explained to you, I said I thought a lot of what you said came off as quite clumsy, okay?
Yeah.
And that's fine. And I didn't agree with a lot of it, but I know the intent of you as a person as well, and know that there wouldn't have been that intent to cause any kind of harm or any kind of sort of pain to people and make it feel like you're marginalizing people, right? I know you well enough to know that that's not intent. So I think
Mm.
that's the first thing is kind of you've said something and it's not been well received. Okay, fine. Not everything we do in life is going to be. But I think what's really been really important is that you've gone out and you've searched and you've asked those questions and you've looked to understand. I've
Yeah,
never,
that's it. I wish I'd not got involved in the online debate because that's not where you have a conversation like that.
no, but
But
if I,
I am glad that I've had the conversations.
yeah,
And if I had to, you know, if the only way that I was going to have those conversations with people was by making a mistake in the first place, then, you know, so be it. Like
I,
that's
I think that's a really key,
some
yeah,
good comes from it.
that's a good takeaway to take from it because it's enabled you to have those conversations. It's enabled you to think in a way that you've not thought before. Like
Yeah.
we've had conversation on here about, and I've mentioned this a few times about how I really despise people treating women's wrestling as a genre. And
Mm.
again, representation, fans, and something I mentioned, but I've been going to shows in the UK for a long time, right? I'm an old man. I've been going since 2004, right? And I've seen the crowds change dramatically. I've
Yeah.
seen it being lots of men with maybe the occasional women there. I've seen women who have been treated, and I'm just going to say this, it still happens even today, but women who are treated as sex objects, who are there as a for the male
Wrestlers or
gaze,
fans?
both, both,
Yeah.
and who are treated in such a bad way. And I've never witnessed anything too bad that's got out of hand, and I've seen people be able to handle themselves and people be involved. But
For how long
I,
were wrestling fans just referred to as ring rats?
yeah, exactly, and all that disgusting stuff, and that's because as well, part of it was because the major US company was presenting women in a
Yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
sexualized way. I'm not making excuses for it at all,
I
not.
always go
But
back, mate, to when I first started watching British wrestling on demand, and I went back, and I wasn't watching Rev Pro. I'd just like to say that I wasn't watching old Rev Pro shows, because whenever I was watching old Rev Pro shows, my wife would make a comment to say this isn't what you were watching before.
mhm,
But I did used to watch old Progress shows. In the pandemic, I'd watch old Progress shows because I was they were the company that was on the WWE network,
yeah,
and I got the demand Progress, and I thought, I'm going to go back and watch, like, Samoa Joe wrestled for these guys. Cool, let's go watch Samoa Joe versus Rampage Brown. Um, and that kind of like Jimmy Havoc time period, my
mhm,
wife would come in the room and she'd be like, I don't like this. I'd be like, what do you mean? Like, can you not tell, like, that crowd is so hostile? I would not feel safe in that crowd.
mhm, and
And it's interesting because, like, that's at a time when there was no women's wrestling whatsoever in the UK. Or Ginny might wrestle,
mhm,
like, just every now and then. And I suppose also, like, is International Women's Day not a day to celebrate people like Ginny? Like, how hard it must have been for her to come up.
yeah, and that's it. Like,
And
yeah,
maybe as well, if I came into British wrestling after speaking out, not during it. I wonder how many people's experiences are like from having lived through speaking out
mm,
and having seen the fact that it really wasn't that long ago that the treatment of women wrestlers was could be
mhm,
so shocking
yep,
that it's not only that is it not like particularly safe to go to a wrestling show, it's not safe to go to a wrestling school,
absolutely, and
it's not
that look,
safe to consider a career as a wrestler.
yeah, there is a lot of things that have come out the last couple of days
Yeah,
about
and I
about
think that's
that as well,
that's
and
what
I
it
think
all
that's
comes down to. And like, one thing I really want to still put over is I don't think everybody like this is probably we know that people in Rev Pro listen to our podcast, right? We know that. So there'll be people in Rev Pro that listen to this podcast. And maybe that part of it is not going to do us any favors. But I still don't think that Rev Pro deserve absolute pelters for Sunday. And I still don't think that they deserve like a load of, abuse for it and criticism for it. Criticism, no. Criticism, I do think they deserve for it.
yeah,
That's
agreed.
that. That was the wrong word. Um, I think it's like it's an opportunity for the company to hear what people are saying, and I've learned a lot over the last few days. And if this podcast helps, you know, ultimately Andy to realize just what having a women's match on every card means
Yeah,
to women, young women, girls, fans, the environment that it creates, and the fact that are equal opportunities given to men and women. Rev Pro are doing better with women than they have ever done. there are more opportunities for women in RevPro than ever. That doesn't mean that it's anywhere near perfect yet, because we shouldn't have weeks where there are no women on the card.
No, I would agree with that. And
If I
yeah,
took my girls on Sunday as their first ever wrestling show, would they want to go back again? That's a key thing, isn't it?
hmm
And if I took my wife on Sunday to her first ever wrestling show, would she have enjoyed it? I'm sure that you could argue, well, of course they would, because the wrestling was really, really good. But you can't account for that representation, I think, if you're someone who's never been marginalised. That's what I've really learned.
hmm Yeah, agreed. Dave, I think this feels like a good place to leave it. I think we've had a very good open conversation, I think. Anything else you want to add, or are you happy with what we've covered?
The only thing that's been kind of lingering in my head the whole time that I've not mentioned is I made a really clumsy comment about Black History Month. And I don't like the fact that it's there. I was tempted to delete it, but I believe in accountability. So the only tweet that I deleted of all of them was the tweet saying that I think my time on Twitter is coming to an end, which I've been thinking for a long time. I'm not entirely sure if Twitter's my place anymore. I don't really get a lot of positivity from it, but I didn't want that to be like, oh, I've got some pelters off of people. Think I better sneak off into the shadows. So I left it there. The point I was trying to make, and you said it perfectly, I made it really clumsily, was in the past, other wrestling companies, notably big American wrestling companies, have been guilty of only paying attention to certain groups of people when it is the calendar time to pay attention to them.
hmm
And we've seen Jinder Mahal get the big push in WWE because they're trying to tap into the Indian market, and it was so blatantly obvious. And it seems like a silly example, but Abaddon gets a run out in AEW because it's Halloween.
hmm
And and the point I was trying to make was times in the past where a black wrestler's got a little push because it's Black History Month, and everyone can see through that tokenism.
hmm
And that's what we're trying to avoid. And if RevPro can only put on a token women's match, and it's so blatantly a token women's match, then that's a mistake to do.
Yes.
And if I had 1,000 characters, I probably could have made that quite coherent. But I had 140, and that's where I should have realised. Just don't
Mhm.
say it at all, then, Dave.
And
Don't say it at all.
I think
Um,
that's a really good point. And I think one of the bit I just kind of want to echo what you said a few minutes ago as well is that yeah, we do know that people within the company listen to this, right? And there's some there's some names that I've heard listen to this that shock me, right? Like we know that there are prominent people, is what I'll say, that will listen to what we say, and we believe we've said this as well that we believe in accountability for what we say with everything that
yes,
we do, not just
it's why
because
we both put our names and our faces out there,
yeah,
right?
and not
We
just
don't
because
hide behind a meme as an avatar
yeah,
or a
exactly.
name that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, yeah, Cromwell George and Dave the Mark. But no,
But do
seriously,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
But there's
I get,
Cromwell George. He's sitting there right now, and when I go to a show, you're there. I can
yeah,
spot you. I know who you are.
100%. And I think because we are aware, and I've spoken to wrestlers, and I'm not saying this in like I'm friends with them. I'm not, right. There's that parasocial isn't there, but I have spoken to wrestlers on a human level who will kind of show you a side that you kind of get. It does make you take stock with how human they are, right? So when I say
Hmm.
we're accountable, I don't mean we're accountable for if we say something, someone prominent might hear us, and that might um, cause aggro. I'm not going to speak for Dave here, purely because it wouldn't be fair to you. I don't give a fuck, right? I don't give a fuck if I upset someone in a prominent position because I feel passionately about this, right? I will say that. Um, I do give a fuck if we were to upset someone with our words on a human level, like a genuine, unfair human level. So that's what I mean when I say we're accountable for what we say. And I think that us being accountable for what we say means that having this platform and having this voice means that when something like this that the whole community feels strongly against, or feels strongly about, I should say, when I said I've been going to shows when it has been manly men in what is perhaps like one of the campest, if not the campest thing to be involved in the history of the entertainments we can
Wheeling
enjoy.
up and rolling around in your tights.
Exactly. And I've seen crowds go from sexualizing women and that is it, to accepting that women can be badasses, to seeing the crowds become more women, more female presenting, more people who exist on all kinds of the binary spectrum, who live their lives authentically and can do so amongst the crowd because they feel safe, they feel accepted. And that starts with making sure that when these issues come up and what might feel tokenism if they were to do it, and that maybe that is a concern that internally they had. I don't know. I haven't spoken to people there shockingly about it, of course, but like we don't know. That might be a thing that they've considered, but it's important that if you make that decision and the voices are strong, that you genuinely sit down, take the time and listen to every single concern, and think, would I still done it this way? And if you would,
Yeah,
that's fine, but listen to what the concerns are and accept, like you said, I think kind of where I would like to end for me is what Emma said there is kind of how I've felt, but I've never been able to verbalize it. Is and I said this, I don't like people treating women's wrestling as a genre because it's not. The only difference is that they are women, they're not men. Okay. Um, but tag team wrestling is a genre. Cruiserweight wrestling is a genre. Heavyweight clashes is a genre, if you will. But the women's division is more than a genre. It just needs more time, more representation, and I think that's where I stand.
yeah, I completely agree, mate. And I think that ultimately, I don't think that Rev Pro is guilty on Sunday of any heinous crime against wrestling. I think they're guilty of some poor forward planning that put them in a position where they couldn't represent women's wrestling like they normally do, or represent the women of wrestling, I should say.
Hmm.
Um, and when the realization was that we're not going to run a match, not doing anything at all to acknowledge it,
Hmm.
and I do genuinely believe that in the goodness of the people involved in RevPro, that they would have thought about all the different things that they could have done and thought
Sure.
that no matter what we do, it's not gonna feel right. And it's probably at that stage going to be like we kind of messed up a little bit earlier on here, where without kind of booking something further in advance, we can't go
Hmm.
back in time now. But if this just means that you know this doesn't happen again in the future, then that's the good that comes from it.
Absolutely. There's two things that can happen, right? And I kind of there's a quote that I heard once. It said the best time to have done something would have been whenever it occurred. The next best time to do it is now. And I think that
Like that.
what needs to come from this is that it's okay to admit you got it wrong, and they don't have to. I'm not saying that they have to come out publicly and say that, right? Like that is a
No,
conversation they
just
can have
an internal
internally.
conversation
Yeah, 100%.
between
But
you know Andy and when Craig, I suppose,
yeah, and,
really.
and they could say, hey, look, we've this is how we've done it. We've judged the mood incorrectly. Okay, what we're going to do differently for next time, and that's it. It's taking the same approach that you've done. You've gone away and gone, what can I learn here,
Yeah,
and actually make a conscious effort into doing it. And then if they go away and something similar happens again, then I think it's a more serious conversation that people would have. And I think at that point, people would be right to have a more serious conversation
Yeah,
about it. But it's about what can we learn from it.
yeah, absolutely. And between now and the anniversary show, the
Hmm.
big one, continue to book awesome stories in the women's division because they are.
Yeah,
It's just getting the consistency so it's on every card. And if can't extend a story, then see it as an opportunity rather than seeing it as something that is okay to just put a pin in.
exactly. One of the things you said earlier was an eliminator match. Alex Windsor is an AEW wrestler, and you could take someone who kind of like what they've been doing with wrestlers from Kanji, Sapphire, going against Mercedes Moné Emerson, how much that's helped their stock rise. You
Yeah,
could do
100%.
you could
Put
do the
somebody in
same
the ring
thing
with
here.
Alex Windsor. You're not telling me that Alex Windsor can't go in the ring with a young wrestler who's not yet ready for the big
Hmm.
lights, but she couldn't protect her and give her a good match.
Yeah, yeah,
And that be the prize for the initial match, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I keep saying one last thing. One last thing I would like to see change, and this is a very easy change that RevPro could do. And we've spoken about representation, divisions, all of this stuff, right? RevPro will announce this is a tag team division match or tag team match. RevPro will announce this is a cruiserweight division match. RevPro will announce this is a women's division match, but they don't do the same for the men's. That is one thing that I think could be changed, and that would be, for me, that would be a good start as well.
What do they say?
They don't.
The
They
following
just
contest is a tag
think
team division match
is
scheduled for one fall.
yeah, is a singles match.
The following match is a women's division match
Yep,
scheduled for one fall. Do they say the following is a cruiserweight division match?
I'm pretty sure.
But
But it,
ultimately, they're your four divisions. The following is a heavyweight division match scheduled for one fall. It's small things, isn't it?
mhm,
But they
yeah,
do make a difference.
exactly. And it's the if you want to show commitment, AEW, it was something that AEW criticized for a long time about saying world title, men's world
Yeah,
title. I think it's just again, it's looking at the
the
small.
teeny tiny women's world title when it
It's
first came out, right?
yeah, it's a small detail, right? It's a very small detail, but it could have such a big impact on just how people
But
view it.
also, that's something where I'd like to think anyone who's stayed with us this deep into the podcast, we're all living in real time and we're all making decisions in the moment.
Hmm.
It's okay to look at a decision and think, didn't handle that well. Try and do better next time.
100%.
Like that's human, isn't it? That's
Yeah,
part of being human. And you know, I don't watch AEW as much as you do these days,
I don't
but
watch much these days, to be
from do you
fair.
not watch it at all?
Not really,
Well,
no.
from the outside looking in, it looks like they're doing pretty good with their women these days.
Yeah,
Tag titles, TBS champion, um, the AEW women's champion,
yeah,
loads of different stuff going on.
yeah. And look,
But it used to be shit.
you've got people like so, and again, this is something you saw in the UK would be book round one or two women, right? And again, we're moving far away from that as a scene, right? And this is why
Yeah,
we talk about this and we say because we know what it used to be, but you've got people like Tekla who is an absolute star alongside Tony Storm. You've got Willow, you've got Chris Statlander, you've got
look
a
what they've
tag
done with
team of
people like Julia Hart and Sky Blue,
yeah,
who when they first came in were just green kind of jobbers.
yeah. You've got bloody Alex Windsor and Jamie Hayter as a tag team. Like you've got all these
The
great
Brawling
women who are
Birds.
yeah put into great positions to thrive. And this is again, I think And we need to work towards this in wrestling, and this is everywhere. This isn't just Rev Pro. And when I say everywhere, I mean anywhere that has a that is a non-women exclusive promotion. But it still is a long way from being that your most over people will be your biggest featured stars, regardless of
Yeah.
gender. And I
And
think, yeah, we need to get
and
there.
I'm not saying, I mean, because the argument would be, well, of course AEW's got better with their women because they've been able to recruit more quality women by going a little bit further afield and bringing in an Alex Windsor and a Jamie Hayter. You know, they dabbled with Jamie Hayter, didn't they? Right at the start of AEW, they had her and B Priestley.
Hmm.
Don't know what happened, whether they chose not to pursue her or
I
Jamie turned them down.
believe it was pandemic related.
Yeah.
I believe.
So and then they've come back, and Andy doesn't have, he can't magic up a crop of women who are Rev Pro ready,
Hmm.
but he can help nurture women to becoming Rev Pro ready, because Elvin Narayan and Isaac Murray and Chicago Desai aren't Rev Pro ready, but they're going to become it. And yes, you could say the Portsmouth School of Wrestling and the London School of Wrestling doesn't have female contenders, but Ronnie Knox was a regular at the London School of Wrestling and she
Hmm.
got a couple of chances, but not enough investment to build her up.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. I've always had Rev Pros like the finishing school. So wrestlers are, there is a pecking order, there is a hierarchy. People, places like WrestleForce and places like Elevation Wrestling, places like Spinebuster Media, like they give opportunities to men and women in a smaller spotlight
Hmm.
with less scrutiny, where mistakes aren't going to get as noticed, where you're not expected to go 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, where we're not, I mean, go out of your way to watch Cameron Kai versus Joe Lando, mate, from Sunday, because it was excellent. But there maybe aren't as many women who could deliver a match of that quality in the speed and snugness that those two worked.
Hmm. Yeah, understand that. And I,
You give you give opportunities and you protect people, right?
yeah,
We'd
and I,
rather see women have a simpler match than no match at all,
hmm,
or a shorter match than no match at all. And it's there's just so much to take away from this conversation this week, really, isn't there?
yeah, and one of the things that I see a lot on Twitter, and I feel kind of in the scene is there's a lot of the younger female fans that we're seeing sort of around the ages of 16, 17, maybe slightly younger. You see them at shows getting really into this, but then you see them getting older and you hear them like see them post on Twitter and things like talk about I want to go and train, I want to do this, I want to do that, and
Yeah,
it's so amazing. And I think back to your point at Joe Lando and Cameron Kai, great match, but there would have been a time when these guys wouldn't have been ready, right? Like to have
yep.
the match that they're having now. But
Cameron
I
Kai
think,
was 16 when he debuted for Rev Pro.
yeah, but what, and I think was that against Michael Oku? Was that the Southampton match? Anyway, that's not
Yeah,
important, right?
it
Not
might have been.
important right now. The point I'm making there is that the one barrier that these guys would never have had is their gender, right? And
Yeah,
again, women have had that. It's been something that, like we said, that women are not looked at or have in the past not been looked at as being as strong as the men or this as the men or that as the men. Then there was the sexualization, which was just a further anchor that could drag like what people's opinions were. So they've had a lot against them as a group and have worked and clawed hard to get the recognition it's rightly deserved. And I think showing this next crop that's coming through, actually, there is a potential spot there for you. and showing that these
Yeah.
people who maybe, like you said, and it's not a unfair criticism to say that there might be people that are featured sometimes that aren't RevPro ready. And I say that across every division that RevPro is run, because I've seen
I
people,
will be
yeah,
the first to say that the Mecca versus Kuro match
hmm
suggests that maybe those two guys aren't completely Rev Pro ready.
and look, I've seen lots of people over the years. I'd say probably not ready, but it's important that opportunities are given because it shows that opportunities, if the opportunities are there, they can be there again, and it helps people
Yes,
strive to get there.
because those two lads will get further opportunities, I'm sure, and rightfully so, because one sloppy performance doesn't mean that you're blacklisted.
hmm
But we've gone from a time where, I remember my first Rev Pro shows, it was, I'm going to see a Sky Smithson match, or I'm going to see a Kanji match, or I'm
hmm
going to see an Alex Windsor match,
Yeah.
or I'm going to see a Danny Luna match.
hmm
And it's going to be Chantel Jordan, or Maya Matthews, or Mercedes Blaze.
hmm
And that's kind of felt like that was it.
Yeah.
I'm going to see a pair of those 7. And with Kanji and Windsor's, struggling with injuries at
Yeah.
times, it was very rare that it would be you have all 7 of them.
hmm
And they've come so far since then.
Yeah.
And it's so important that we're not just being seen as like slamming Rev Pro, because we are still supporters of the company.
100%.
We're still supporters of the product, and we still believe that, and
Yeah.
I understand that decisions like that, with booking must be incredibly difficult, especially
hmm
when you're the person paying for everything and you've got, it's easy to play fantasy booker,
hmm
but
Yeah.
it's just there's a bigger social conversation, isn't there? And that's
Absolutely.
that's kind of what we've had, and I hope lots of other people continue to have it. And
Yeah.
I hope that the position that we've come from has been appreciated in the fact that we're just trying to. Well, I have, because actually, I think you're a lot more further ahead than I am in terms of just trying to understand the importance of representation and that element of it.
Yeah.
I thought I understood it quite well, but actually, I've realised that I don't fully.
And that's not a bad place to be if you're going to learn from, and like you said, have these conversations. That's a really good place to be. What I would say, and where this is, I've said this a lot. My final, and I'll say this before we say goodbye, is that anyone out there who has spent as long as we have been talking about this, listening to everything we have to say, if you if you feel strongly about this, go write those blog posts, go write those articles, go make those podcast episodes and talk about this, because it's really important stuff that needs to be talked about and needs people to learn from. And what you put out there could be something someone listens to and that resonates with them and changes the viewpoint. I couldn't say any more than that. Just go out there, talk about the things that are important to you, and make a difference.
Perfect place to end, my friend.
Until next time.